Yeah, good morning and a very warm welcome for this session of Aadhaar. I now welcome Asha Krishnan to present this. Asha, you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, morning everybody. I thank the conference for selecting this particular track. I must confess that it may not be totally a perfect match for Made in India or for technical, but not audible now? Little better? I just twisted it. Hello, this is better? Yeah. So, brief introduction. My name is Asha Krishnan. I've been in the software industry for about 25 years now. I was working with, no? I think they can't hear at the back. Maybe you guys can just come in the front? I'll try to shout. Okay, so I've been in software for over 25 years now. I'm with UIDI for the last 3.5 years. And for 20 years, I was with Patni, a regular software company, which is no longer there. So I want to, I was just sitting through the earlier session in this room, and I felt that perhaps this is not really tech stuff, and it's not really made in India, truly made in India, in the sense that it is not from the manufacturing field, nor is it a product for consumption outside. But it's still a very made in India solution. So, it may not really fit in what you're looking for, but I hope there's some curiosity around it. So let me start with it. Oops. Yeah. Okay, so this is what the agenda is like. So how many of you are familiar with Aadhaar? Everybody is. Okay, so that's good. Oops, something is going wrong. Aadhaar over here. Yeah. So what is Aadhaar? Aadhaar is a 12-digit number. That's one way to look at it. And it's a random number in the sense that unlike other identifiers, there's no information built into the number. So there's no way you can profile anybody. You can't say, okay, where are the Aadhaars from Maharashtra or Bombay or XYZ. So it's really a random number, truly a random number. 12 digits because we're a big country and we need to accommodate billion people for a few years now. So 11 digits are really used for the generation of Aadhaar, and with some limitations with regards to checksum and all, there are about 80 billion Aadhaars, which should take care of most of India population. A Government of India program for creation of unique IDs, which is what it is. I mean, it's not state specific, it's pan-India. And one of the comments by our ex-DG, that is Director General, Mr. R.S. Sharma, is that it has been designed to be universal and basic identity platform. What it means is that unlike other identifiers like the PAN number or the driving license, Aadhaar is supposed to be universal. That means every resident of the country can get it. And it's purely that, it's just the identity. There's no connotations to your caste, your income, your, there's no profiling as such. So it's a pure identity generation program. The RBI governor said it's a very important tool in banking, and that really comes from the fact that once you can identify a person, uniquely, then you can build some banking history around that person. You can ensure that your financial inclusion programs are working. You can then start looking at data a little more clearly on what's working and what's not, in the sense that financial inclusion in India has been maybe more than 10 years old, but we still know that a lot of people are out of banking. So the moment you can identify individuals uniquely in India, that itself can help you get into financial inclusion more meaningfully. Then there's this nice jam trinity coined by Arvind Subramaniam, who is the chief economic advisor, and he calls it the link in jam trinity. So any idea what jam is here? Okay, so jam is an acronym coming out of Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile. And there is a lot of importance given to the fact that we now have 1 billion Aadhaars, almost there. And because of the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, we have a lot of, close to 1 billion accounts perhaps. And we are likely to be 1 billion mobile users. So the landscape now changes on how we can do subsidies in India. And that's why he calls it the jam trinity. So he feels that these three numbers can help us deliver subsidies, direct benefits to, where it should go. And ex-chairman Nandan Nilakanji says critical plumbing for the welfare state. I mean, you do have a big welfare scheme in India from the central government and from the state government, but execution is really a challenge in India. And he feels that the Aadhaar identity infrastructure, if you make a robust infrastructure, you can actually do something with all the welfare which you're on policy which you have, but you're not able to deliver. So he feels that this is critical. This is a big piece of execution. Okay, and what I'd like to add here, and I think this could be true for the audience, is that because of the open nature of how this has been deployed, you now have a, you now have a situation where you have billion verified, validated, authenticable IDs pan-India. So, and you also have technology which lets you connect to this database, so to speak. So you can build so many applications. So it's the perspective that you have on what Aadhaar is. At the very basic level, it's a 12-digit number, but it can be so much more. And I hope, this presentation will let you see that. So how do you get an Aadhaar? If you have gone through the enrollment process, there's just some basics that are collected, demographics, and there's biometric, photograph, all 10 fingerprints and 2 irises. And then UIDI deduplicates and generates a 12-digit ID. So the deduplication is the crux of the whole thing. I mean, you had all kinds of databases in the government, but the fact is that you don't have any comprehensive deduplicated database. So this is the first time that you have a pan-Indian biometrics-based deduplication. And this is already at 900 million. So about 94% of the adults in India are already covered. Okay, how can Aadhaar be used? So
प्रूफ आइडेंटिटी प्रूफ मांगते हैं तो उनके पास अवेलेबल नहीं होता है, किसी का अगर होता भी है तो नाम गलत होता है।
मेरा बैंक में खाता नहीं है, इसलिए नहीं है कि मेरा पहचान पत्र था वो गुम हो गया।
मेरा पास न पहचान पत्र है न कुछ है, पैसा जमा करने के लिए हमरा कुछ नहीं।
So the fact is that while in this room we might have access to all kinds of identities, largely in India that's not the case, and also that it might be a case that you can avail through a gazetted government officer some kind of identity, but it's running pillar to post. I mean, starting from birth certificates, I guess all of you are aware of how it is. So this is the first time that you can actually get a POI and a POA, which is proof of identity and proof of address, which works for multiple schemes in the country. So this is the first time that, you might see this surge in bank accounts, this surge in many schemes where people are excluded simply because they don't have access to POI, POA. I mean, however bizarre that sounds, that's the reality. Okay. So, and now once you have an identity, this is the other side of it. At a very simple level, it's a number. You add it, it's like a foreign key, you deduplicate your service database, you weed out people who've died, who've taken multiple benefits, all those kind of things. So as a government department who is funding a lot of the schemes, I now have the ability, I might have had through field visits before, and I might have had reasons not to clean up before. But now there's a very transparent way where you can, and a very simple way, where you can simply add the Aadhaar number of your beneficiary, and then you can deduplicate your database. Okay, so apart from the number generation, UIDAI also offers online 24/7 services. And this is good because if you see the earlier schemes in India, and actually this might be even beyond India, that mostly government identifiers are only lookups, okay? So you look up a PAN number, which people can, and some of the states allow you to look up driving license or ration card number or things like that. But here you actually have an online service which will require the number and the resident's biometric or an OTP, and it can tell you whether the number belongs to the particular resident. So this authentication service 24/7 will tell you yes or no. In addition to this, there's another important service which is also an online service which is called eKYC or e-Know Your Customer. So like I said, for many of the schemes, including opening a bank account, they will always ask you for KYC, KYC formalities, KYC norms. So this online service will return you the identity, the person's demographics and the photograph. So you go to a bank, you give your Aadhaar number and your biometric, and you're returned a photo and the details, address and so on. So these are the two services. So just like you saw that the number can be used by embedding it into a database for cleaning up your database, service database, how can online service be used, the ones that UIDAI is providing? So when you actually, as revenue department, if I'm commissioner revenue department and I need to disperse all my pensions, I know that it is going in some way either through money order, or it's going through some department official giving the money, or through post or whatever. But somewhere there is always a sense, and there are plenty of studies to show that this finally doesn't reach the beneficiary. So this is the first time you can actually track whether the money or the service was delivered to the intended beneficiary. And how do you do it? Because you know the beneficiary's Aadhaar number, and at the time of delivery, you authenticate the person. So an example of this is how old age pensions or disability pensions or widow pensions or all the security pensions that Government of India and state governments heavily spend on can be ensured that they reach the right beneficiaries. Same is true about the public distribution system in India. So that's a huge distribution system. It's a very vital distribution system, but it's also a very leaky distribution system. So this is the way to ensure that your Antodaya beneficiaries, your BPL beneficiaries are all actually getting covered under this. Okay, so what we have is an identity infrastructure which is giving a pan-India, universal, cost-effective, because you can deploy these on all kinds of devices now. And it's a ready-made thing. Anybody who has a service to be delivered can use the system. It's not that you have to now, as a service provider, go start collecting fingerprints and iris and the whole drama. So this is all done, ready, available for use. Okay, so here's a short number slide, because Aadhaar always people talk about numbers, right? So Aadhaar, population of India also people talk about numbers. Population of India is 1.28 billion, which is projected for 2015. Aadhaar generated is 0.95 billion. So it is, by the end of December, it's likely to be 1 billion. 94% of the adults are covered. this leaves 0 to 17 because the focus was not so much on infants and school-going children. So now the focus in the field is really to cover those residents as well. Aadhaar generated per day is 1 million, and each Aadhaar which is generated is compared to the gallery of already generated Aadhaars, because it's basically deduplicating. That means you need to compare one person's biometrics with the entire gallery. That's where the numbers come in. And it's huge amounts of storage. I think some articles said it's the biggest biometric database in the world now. So it's huge amounts of storage. And it's also being used. So it's not something that's just been created and kept. As of today, people who authenticated are 11 crores. 11 crores is still a small number in India, but the usage is growing. And the cost per Aadhaar, just like the mass, what was that? Mars expedition, Mangalan, is a fraction of what it is to the rest of the world. So while there are many naysayers, I hope this presentation will prove the cost and the value effectiveness of having this kind of a program in the country. Okay, so now I'll talk about service delivery challenges. Before that, any questions on the overview? Yeah, so for children below the age of 5, it's the parents. Yes, I'll just repeat the question. Her question was for children, biometrics change. So what is the way forward for children? So between 0 and 4, UIDI does not collect any biometrics. It's the parent who authenticates, and just a photograph of the child is taken. So there's a relationship document, which could be either a gazetted officer or a birth certificate, to say this is the parent or the guardian. And there is a biometric of the guardian or the parent that's taken in. So at the age of 5 and at the age of 15, there is a life cycle process to update your biometrics. Because 15 is when it stabilizes, 5 is when it starts at. Yeah.
Another question.
Mike, please. Good. Yeah, I have some slides on security, so maybe we'll take it up then. Actually, Aadhaar was never meant to be paper-based either. It was just meant to be a number. At the, with a lot of debate, it was decided that in India, just a number seems too abstract, and hence there was a paper-based regular India Post delivery. The smart card is actually an older technology in the sense that, there's no real need of the smart card in the sense that everything is working online here. So the biometrics are kept at the back. Everything is kept at the back. You just put a number and that's how you validate. So it's basically a pure online kind of a service. So how the smart card, on the other hand, is something which you have, for example, you might lose it. There's a cost to smart card. There are fingerprints that change, and then you need to reissue the smart card. So in India, there has been, and I say this with some kind of concern, that there has been a lot of these smart card sales which have happened to government projects, which don't really perform on the field. Because, for example, some of the ration card, smart cards, you can store only 2 fingerprints, but when you have a family of 4, it's a family card, and anybody can go and get rations. But the vendors and the system has allowed for these kind of things to happen. So we are actually saying no cards. We don't want to waste money on cards. We already have a very good back-end biometric system. India is very well connected. All you need is very low regular GPRS connectivity, 600 million mobile phones are working. There's no reason why Aadhaar should not work. That's the logic.
Another question.
Yes, the paper is not required, just the number is required. But how do you know that the number belongs to the person? Okay? Yeah, so there are two ways around that. One is that there is a digitally signed e-Aadhaar which you can download. Okay, but in India, getting a message to the field will have that Chinese whisper effect. So people will take a printout of a form and then banks will accept it. But really, what we should be saying is that you accept the tamper-proof e-Aadhaar, which is a digitally signed document, which is available. So that is there. In fact, you can simply, through SMS, email it to a bank account. You know, so, but that takes maturity and time for the field to really figure out its way.
Sorry. So how does the deed? What is the gap here? So are we not able to cover the biometrics for the
Hey, this is the fastest customer acquisition of in the world. Okay, the Aadhaar program has delivered 95 crores, and that is faster than what WhatsApp acquired, apparently. Okay, I've been just reading Nandan Nilekani's book, and so the problem is just that it's been a massive enrollment process, and we beat all records for doing this in record time. So. No. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So so there are two things. One is the number, and the other is the service, right? The online service. So when somebody uses an online service, they will get counted in that. So those 11 crores are people who already used an online service. Sorry.
So what happens after the death of a Aadhaar card holder person? Like,
Yeah.
how do you handle the?
So on the policy, there is a way. Wherein there is a life cycle for death, where somebody dependent who already has an Aadhaar will submit a death request. So let's say I'm a relative or whatever. I give my Aadhaar number, and you also give the death certificate and the person's details, and that number becomes defunct. But right now, in the client, that is not yet implemented.
Hi, I have a question. It's about, in other countries, you have a single ID for identification.
Right.
In India, I think Aadhaar started out with that objective, but I don't think that's been achieved because you can submit your PAN card, you can submit your electricity bill as proof of address, you can submit your passport as your proof of identity, whereas in the US or the UK, for example, you have to have a social security card, you have to have a national insurance number. But in India, as long as we don't make Aadhaar compulsory, you continue to have these various forms of ID card, and therefore the whole purpose of having a single identification or an identity for every individual, I know it's more complex given the numbers in India, but unless we do that, would you think that Aadhaar has achieved its objective?
Yeah, so this is really something that is a parliament question, and you need to, legislate on that. But yeah, the point is taken. The other countries which you're comparing with the US, they have very, very old, mature identification systems. This is a baby. This is just 5 years old, and adoption has started happening despite it not being mandatory. So because, people can see the benefits of it. I mean, Raghuram Rajan and Arvind Subramaniam would not make such comments unless they see the value in the whole thing. So I take your point, but that's some time off, I think. That's some time away.
So,
in
Asha,
India.
just a request.
in
Do you want to
continuation to
take
this
questions in the
question,
end so that you can finish what you wanted to cover?
Yeah. Well, what I want to say is, as long as the overview is through, we can move on to topic 2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
so
are
in
halfway
continuation
through
to this question that was raised, I want to know what is the Supreme Court stand on this, because
Yeah, so I think what Kirtana is saying has a point. Let me quickly run through the slides.
Yeah,
Then
I
we'll
have
have-
a request
because they'll
we won't be able to listen to Asha what she had set out to say. So let's listen to her and maybe have questions towards the end because we are halfway through the time now, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so here are the service delivery challenges. You walk into, and this is a camp which I went to personally. So, Wayanad is one of the more backward districts in Kerala, and you say you're opening an account and people just flood in. And the reason was also because Wayanad was one of the early pilot districts for Aadhaar. So you had people with Aadhaar and they had the hope that they would be able to open the account. Unfortunately, the eKYC and the services were not yet online, so people will come with forms and Aadhaar card. So you can see that the moment you have you have paper-based processes, they are real bottlenecks in India. This is another situation. This is not from my photographs, but I have seen this plenty of times that any ration shop that you walk to, I don't know how many of you have walked into a ration shop, but any ration shop you walk to, you will always find people simply, pushing and rushing because there is absolutely no assurance of service. On paper, pretty much all the ration shops across the country will say that so many kgs were delivered, so many kgs were, given, and every month they will pick up all the grain. But the fact of the matter is, people are insecure because unless you're the first or the fifth in the queue, you won't get your rations. They will say, "Mal nahi aaya," or whatever, and get away with it. So, unless you track the footfall, there is no way on earth that you're going to be able to assure in India that, and the culture is like that. I mean, everybody is colluding to get a part of that leakage. So the whole system is like that. So unless you track the leaf, so to speak, you will not be able to assure that, intended beneficiary gets. And these are all beneficiaries for whom it is a lifeline. So it's very critical for government to get their act together. And the last mile reach of services is woefully absent. I had made some notes, but I can't really remember. This is about the reach of banks in India, because banking is fairly old-fashioned, right, in India. Money transacts through regular brick and mortar kind of branches, okay? So people have to go this is a true story of a Narega worker who goes to collect his wages, which are available only one week of the day, and he spends practically half the day doing it to get about a few rupees, of which he spends 1/5 due to his travel. Okay, so I'll put a small video out for you.
मैं सीतारकोटा से आया हूँ। यहाँ से लगभग 8-9 किलोमीटर पड़ता है। आने जाने में लगभग 4 घंटा लग जाता है। लेकिन बहुत नुकसान हो जाता है मेरा। अगर गांव में बैंक रहता तो इस तरह की दिक्कत नहीं हो जाती।
एक जाक में दूर है, हम बुढ़िया आदमी चले पारी है, ये नहीं गाड़ी घोड़ा मिले है, ये नहीं।
6 महीना साल भर में एक बार बैंक जाते हैं, जरूरत पड़ता है तो किसी आदमी को लेके जाते हैं।
Yeah, so bank services, like I said, is woefully low. I think there are about, largely, I'm just trying to recollect that, but never mind, let me pick up that statistic data. But it's basically rural India is excluded from banking. You can take that. There are about 2.5 lakh villages, but there are maybe a few 20,000 or lesser number of banks. So it just doesn't match up at all. So, so why bother fixing all this? I mean, this has been going on for last how many years, ever since independence. Why bother it? Because government of India spends a lot of money on it. It's about 4% of GDP, which is about $50 billion. So something has to be done with the execution, unless, otherwise you're just running the tap and money down the drain. And apart from the money you're spending, your population is also very vulnerable. 35% is really $2 per day kind of situation. So this is lifeline for them. I mean, you spend 100 kilometers from any big city and you'll see this happening. Go to any pensions delivery. It's awful. So people who are at the other end of receiving this are extremely vulnerable, and Government of India, and not only Government of India, state governments spend a lot of money. This is only Government of India budget. State governments, for example, Tamil Nadu, spends about 4,000 crore rupees just on pensions, social pensions. Think about it. There are about 30 lakh people getting social pensions. This is old age and, you know, disability and all. Unless you have your execution act together, this is big money which is of no benefit. So this is a good statement I picked up from his earlier book, that people, I mean, there are computers. You will go to the smallest villages, you will see computers, but there's no, you know, there's no application, there's no program. Somebody's panchayat secretary's house is holding the laptop. So Government of India has spent a lot of money on infrastructure, on hardware, but how much of it is coming to use? How much of it is really IT applications execution is, you know, pretty pathetic. So this is a real, I mean, the fact that he was chairman for the UIDI brought a lot of attention to the whole thing. I think that that itself was a big thing. So the Aadhaar solution is basically, you know, all this. It can sufficient KYC, inclusion errors can be sorted out. You know it's going to the correct beneficiary. And I'll just show you this process of, so first we saw those paper-based processes, and now how Aadhaar is solving it. Okay, so you have RBI, which allows POI, POA as Aadhaar to open an account. RBI also endorses eKYC, the digital version of POI, POA. So you can actually go to the bank and open it. So here's a small clip.
पैसा नहीं था, हम पैसा नहीं जमा करते थे। अब पैसा हो गया तो आज गए और जमा करके चल आए 200 रुपया।
अब तो ये वाला खाता खुल गया, आधार वाला तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं पड़ता है।
A small anecdote, if you've read Financial Expert by R.K. Narayan, you know, it's an old book where he will talk about any new finance schemes which gets announced at a bank, and there will be below the banyan tree 10 financial experts sitting and helping you fill out forms. You know, so that is how form filling is such a struggle in rural India. Not only rural India, you have migrant workers here. I know my driver has a struggle getting to the bank, filling out the forms. So when you don't have, and this is a pilot from Jharkhand, ke angutha dal diya, paisa nikal gaya. You know, that's the ease of use for this whole thing. And you don't have these error, you know, any scheme, not only banking, any scheme in government of India or state governments involves form filling. And mostly people cannot fill forms. They need somebody to accompany them. It's the whole process. And then in the process, they make mistakes. So here's a very clean database to simply fill form, give you photos, okay? An example of photos, I'll tell you, Narega, NREGA, you know, has a scheme where they said that they want to get the photos of beneficiaries. And they took more than 6 years, and still the photo itself is not complete, the photo part of it. Now you have something, it's an instant, you know, you get the photo and you're all set. Here is another tracking opportunity, you know, and this is electronic tracking of any service that you can think of, whether it's money or it's grain or it's fertilizer or whatever that you distribute. And here is the sort of miracle, which is through Aadhaar micro ATMs, where, you know, the idea is to open up banking. And apart from traditional banks, recently RBI allowed payment banks, you know, there are licenses for payment banks. So you see a lot of new companies like Paytm or some of the other names which are not yet that known, because it's probably 4 or 6 months only, where you basically have a smartphone-like device and anybody can become a business correspondent. The local kirana can become a business correspondent. The money which is as a beneficiary which I have got from Government of India can be withdrawn through a local kirana. You just don't have to do the
मशीन वाला इसका नंबर लिया, अंगूठा लिया, उसके बाद में पैसा हमको निकाल के दे दिया 700 रुपया। मेरा बैलेंस 30 रुपया बच गया। 2 मिनट में निकल गया, मैं बाहर आ गया।
So all the guy does is goes and puts his fingerprint, and he has access to money, and it's all real time. Okay. So we looked at overview, we looked at challenges, and we looked at opportunities, like how Aadhaar tries to solve them. And now the basics of sort of Aadhaar. So what we have is we have two essential processes. One is the enrollment process, where you have this Java-based client, which runs really like a front-end offline kind of a thing, where you go and do all the enrollments, and then that gets uploaded to our back-end enrollment server. The reason for online being that most places will not have connectivity in India. And once it is enrolled, then the back-end takes into action and then does all the magic and generates this unique number. And then in parallel, the letter goes to the beneficiary. Then there's a call center to take care of customer complaints. And this is all multilingual. Like we've got like 24 language supports, and every regional office, we've got 8 regional offices. Every regional office caters to about 4-5 states in the place. Bangalore caters to Tamil Nadu, Malayalam, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Puducherry and Lakshadweep. So the geography is split among so many regional offices. So that's the enrollment process. This is the architecture, and I'm not the best person here for this, but still. So what we have is a front-end Java client with multi-vendor device support. So what has been cleverly done in Aadhaar is, as a guideline, let's say, no vendor lock-ins, okay? So we don't want to depend on anybody specifically for hardware or software. So the front-end client also is a generic interface has been written. All those who want to participate cater to that interface. So you've got multiple vendors at the front end who would provide their biometric capture devices. So those layers, in order to facilitate the participation of multiple vendors, has been encouraged in general. And the use of commodity hardware, the use of all kinds of this open source stuff. That's been the philosophy. So this is the enrollment part. And then the other thing, which is also I think a first in Government of India, is that everything is transparently available to general public. Today, if you want to see what is the Aadhaar count, you can go to the portal and see what it is. Okay, today you want to see how many, what happened to specific states, you can do that. And the whole ecosystem refers to this. So this is the source of truth. Everybody refers to this. This is updated real time. And there is no numbers being cooked up, unlike, or let's say, these are all system generated, which just roll up. It's not like declared numbers, which you might find in other programs. So that's the good thing about it. This is the authentication architecture, which is basically for our online services. It's true for eKYC as well. So this is a one-on-one in the sense that you give a biometric and an Aadhaar number and you return a yes/no, right? That's what the authentication service is about. So it's been deployed on multiple servers. There is redundancy. The main data center is in Bangalore. There's a redundant center in Noida. Everything is active. Templates are generated, biometric templates are generated from Bangalore and replicated in Noida. And then the online services are not really just regular web services, in the sense that you come only through trusted channels. So what I'm calling is authentication server agencies and authentication user agencies. So anybody who wants to avail of this has to be inside this ecosystem. These server agencies are connected through lease lines. The user agency and the server agency can be connected through regular internet, but some of the state governments have their lease lines even for that. So it's a well-known, and through technology, they're all digitally signed through each of these participating agencies for the calls. So it's really a secure, scalable, because you can have multiple, because it's a layer, right? You can have multiple layers, and UIDI only deals with the ASS directly. Okay, here's something you might wonder. So there is strong end-to-end encryption. Okay, so there are a lot of bogies about how Aadhaar packets are being collected by, external agencies and can be. The fact of the matter is that everything is encrypted. Everything is encrypted. There's nothing which is stored on the disk that can be decrypted. And I'll just run this small, might be a little silly, but I'll run it all the same.
The data is encrypted and sealed using a protocol which makes it tamper-proof. The data is encrypted using 2048-bit encryption, making it impossible to decrypt. Only the Unique Identification Authority of India has the key to decrypt and read the data. Nobody, including the operator, individual or agency, can access the data. Decryption by non-authorized user could take millions of years.
This also, maybe I can just keep
Data
this.
center is physically and electronically secure, like a
Same.
fortress. It contains 3 layers of security. The electronic data packet goes through a series of steps before an Aadhaar number is generated. Each packet is scanned in the demilitarized zone, an equivalent of a secure enclosure, separated from the main processing. This ensures only genuine packets go through. Tampered packets and packets with malware are not sent to the data center. Only the checked and verified data packets are sent to the data center for processing and uniqueness check.
Okay, so I'll just touch upon a couple of success factors. The key, I think, okay, so this is some things which I feel have been really critical in the contribution of the success of Aadhaar, is that the initial mandate was to cover 60 crore in 5 years. And every person takes at least 12 minutes on the field to enroll, okay? So this means 50,000 person years field effort. There's no way on earth that Government of India can do it by themselves. So that is why the building of the ecosystem and how you incentivize outcome. So money is paid by Government India only on the generation of Aadhaar. So it's not just a general contract where time and material, you say, okay, you spend 4 months on the field and you get your money. It's only counted on the base of successful Aadhaars. And there was a reason for this. On hindsight, there are so many multiple enrollments by the same person. So there's no money given for multiple enrollments which got rejected. So this really helped. The cost as of now is less than 1 billion, the whole UID cost. Okay, and we have 70, okay, so the way, and then the other point I'd like to point out is the standardized interfaces. That means you create interfaces so that everybody who can be a potential partner jumps in. That brings down the cost for you. The devices cost fell down by a factor of 10 during the Aadhaar project. So, and the commendable thing was with the chairman's energy and drive and total thing, we delivered ahead of time. So he took a very high challenge and it was delivered ahead of time. This is unheard of in Government of India. Okay. So like I said, so even just like for the authentication services, we have server agency, user agencies. For enrollment also, we have registrars and enrollment agencies. So it's UIDI as such is a very lean organization, less than 300 people in the whole setup, but through the agencies, the job was done. Okay. this is again an example of, showing that where all ecosystems are there for UIDI. And the other thing is, create open APIs so that now you set a foundation and people can build creatively on top of it. So you encourage developers, there's a developer side, there are hackathons happening, so there is a whole promotion of new ideas that can use this existing digitized identity infrastructure. So that's been the philosophy again. So the yellows really show you where the Aadhaar standards are. By the way, I'm rushing through it because Kirtana is glaring at me now. And most of this stuff is available, and I'll point to the link where you can pull it from. Okay. Okay. The other thing, so one of the success factors was partners, ecosystem nurturing. Second success factor was standardization, interface to allow. Third clever factor was deduplication, the way it's implemented. We didn't try to do algorithms ourselves, but we use best of breed and we make best of breed compete with each other. So it's a dynamic allocation of requests based on how good your accuracy has been, how good your throughput has been. Okay, and you can see that cost has worldwide benchmark is 20 rupees per deduplication. We are a fraction of the cost. Okay. So this is just a quick through. Incubated in 2009, issue of first Aadhaar in 2011. Some more states added, the new government comes in and the mandate has been increased to be delivered by. So all's well on the Aadhaar front after a very tumultuous ride. Okay. And benefits, as you can see, 12,000 crores, 2 billion saved just in 1 year. And cost of the program is only 1 billion. So already the cost of the program has been covered. Okay. So there are no naysayers with regards to the value addition of Aadhaar. And these are all cases where there's another wonderful example which I have been tracking, which is transactions in Tamil Nadu, which have ramped up from 5 lakh to 9 lakh. And I can see at least 50 lakhs happening in the next 6 months, because there are pensioners, there are Narega workers, there are 80 lakh Narega workers in Tamil Nadu, there are 40 lakh pensioners in Tamil Nadu, will all benefit from this reach of banking. Okay. And these are all again big numbers, as you can see, direct transfer of money. So Aadhaar as a financial address. So if government wants to transfer money to me, they don't need my bank account. All they need is my Aadhaar number. And although this might sound trivial, let me tell you that when government transfers money to a bank account, it's not at all transparent, because your databases will have account X on one day and it'll have account Y on another day. So if you look at a Narega database, sometimes you will find that the account number changing. Of course, now they have this process of freezing the account number. But very often it will be some political secretary who gets all the money. And if you talk to people, who do Narega work, you will say, 80 rupees mila, or, something which gets, some crumbs reach them, but it's not really what the law is supposed to give them. So one good thing is speedy transfer and using Aadhaar. That's the value of using Aadhaar and not your account number. Questions afterwards? 5 minutes of questions. Yeah. So there is false accept ratio and any biometric reject ratio and accept ratio are those two thresholds around which this happens. So there are possibilities that you may not have that great fingerprint, so when you come you might not identify it. So technically there is a possibility.
And what's the eKYC penetration in India?
eKYC penetration, I'll have to look up, but I can tell you.
Like, are there technical challenges that institutions are facing while implementing eKYC?
Actually, technically, there is no challenge as such. The challenge is really the political will in the senior management to push through. Let's say some bank, like Axis Bank, takes up the challenge and goes to rural India. Some banks don't have that culture of doing it. And of course, SBI is now doing a lot of things. SBI is one of the biggest banks. But that is where RBI's, thing to allow many more payment banks is really a boon because it's going to increase the reach. So technically, there's no challenge.
Like in American Express, we implemented eKYC.
Right.
And we could see a lot of connectivity issues that we needed to implement eKYC, due to which we weren't able to have a lot of penetration.
Well, I don't go with that statement. There could have been some challenges because the fact is that eKYC requires just general GPRS. There's no additional, big network things that we are looking at. It's just your Aadhaar number and a template of your biometric. The fingerprint template is about 300 bytes. It doesn't require much network bandwidth at all. So there's really, if you say, is it a network issue? I don't agree.
Okay, thank you.
Certification for a resident. Yeah, her question was regarding immigrants. So Aadhaar is less looking at what is defined as resident by Government of India, which is like 6 months in the country is what Government of India defines as a regular resident. So immigration is not something which Aadhaar is going to step into. It's a pure identity. That is for Home Ministry or some other ministry to take up, or Defense Ministry or something. Immigration is not. So Chairman was very clear that the focus should be on what it's meant to be. Don't get into different turf. Just focus on creating that robust identity.
Okay, so the question is, can we link the PAN ID and the Aadhaar number? Or at least do we see it happening in the future? Because today if I have to deal with the banking system, then they ask for the PAN card and they ask for Aadhaar. So if I don't have these two documents which are separate, then things don't really move. So is there a possibility
No, banks don't have PAN as a mandatory. Neither do they have Aadhaar as a mandatory.
They do. So that's been my experience for the last 1.5 months because I've been trying to do something.
Okay, but then there may be like non-frill accounts of the banks don't have, because most of rural India will not have. PAN IDs in India is probably 10% of Indians or even lesser. So it definitely cannot be that PAN ID is a mandatory for all kinds of accounts. So there are no frill accounts, which are basically for people who are beneficiaries of the state. And they can't have a PAN ID. How can you expect them to have a PAN ID? They don't have any ID to start with.
What is the cost?
Oh, right, yeah. So Supreme Court, the current stand is that initially they said it's going to be used only for PDS, which is public distribution system, but now they have allowed it to extend it for 6 other systems. So Narega, pensions, scholarships, all that are allowed by Supreme Court. There is a hearing to discuss on the data privacy issue, which is a larger issue, for which I think some 9-bench constitutional bench is yet to be set up. So that's an open issue at the moment. Whether the state can at all accept biometrics. So that's a bigger issue. Why would it make statements like that? Na? Supreme Court is very, what do you say?
They can accept any other government recognized cards or PAN cards.
Yeah, so you're right in that sense that this alone is not a mandatory thing, if that's what you mean. So Supreme Court says that Aadhaar is not a mandatory thing. you cannot enforce any service provider to, have, like for example, no state government can say that I will give you this service only if you give my Aadhaar. So they have to have n such identities, and no refusal of service can happen based on Aadhaar.
So don't you think this becomes another PAN card kind of a card?
I definitely do not. PAN card is only, like I said, 10% on lesser than India. I mean, you have to look at the demographics of the country to know what an ID means in India. Okay? So it's definitely not an equivalent of a PAN card. And anything new, especially in India, will take time to institutionalize, There are naysayers, there are people who don't want to do it for vested interests. I mean, why would any state government or any department that is making money out of this whole non-transparency suddenly be willing and embrace all this? They will set the cat among the pigeons and create the whole, anti thing for the whole thing. So it takes time. And so the data privacy is another area which we'll have to see how it is handled in India. In fact, the chairman was one of the first to say that we need to have Data Privacy Act before Aadhaar was started also. So it's a kind of ironic.
I had a question. So how can we make it a little more user-friendly? Now with India being so much on mobile, I mean, I have a job today in Bangalore, tomorrow I have somewhere in Delhi, I move.
Yeah,
so
I think the key is applications. The more killer applications we have, which will enable mobile applications and usage of this data, it just becomes more user-friendly. For example, if you have payment, you have a mobile payment system, just like Paytm or Ola Money that you do, there's no reason why you cannot have an Aadhaar money-based payment system.
Yeah, and even in terms of the data change, say for example, address change, or after marriage, the person has to change the surname or something. I mean, can we make it a little more flexible?
Yeah,
or
actually there's a new API which is just being released, which is called Mobile Update API. So, see, there are only, as techies, this will be a good question for you. There are only 3 key APIs which are done for now. That is the Authentication API, eKYC API, and the OTP API. Okay, but there are many more which are likely to come, which will simply, then fuel this whole ease of usage. Because now you have a digital database. You can potentially do so much with it. The focus has been first in enrollment, because government schemes, unless all the beneficiaries are enrolled, they won't like to go that way. So the focus has been on enrollment in the last 5 years, but now I think you will see a lot more applications. And this is something which you might even want to take as CSR projects in your company. Let's say you want to put an attendance system in government schools in India. You have some way of authenticating every teacher. We all know that there's a big problem with attendance in government schools, right? How about taking up that as a CSR project? So you can always build. Once you look at the APIs, I think you will have some creative ways, and that will make it more user-friendly.
And can these updates be shared with, probably through newspapers or something where, you get to reach all, everyone across as much as possible?
Yeah, I think the UIDF website, uidf.gov.in, is got excellent documentation. I've never seen any government website with such good documentation. To the T, there's a developer website which will give you sample code on how to use the API. There has been a challenge with Aadhaar on political fronts, as you all know. So advertising has been, limited to what goes politically well. So, but there has been things like hackathons and supporting of the ecosystem to generate further applications in this area. Well, there is a Google Groups for auth, but apart from that, there isn't anything. But you can always put a Google on Aadhaar, and then, like we do, right? We get all the newspaper clippings and everything that happens. So you could put a Google link and just get your alerts for uidf.gov.India. Okay, thank you so much for putting up with this.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Asha. You can catch her you know, beyond the room. We'll be here till lunch. Or, yeah. Okay. Here, Asha.
Thank you. Thanks to Kirtana, she really pushed me to taking this talk.